Hello, I'm Karma Kitaj, and I am your host for A Livelihood, New Adventures as We Age. On A Livelihood, I invite guests who are over age 50 who have started some new adventure in their lives. So today I'm going to introduce you to Alexandra Spingarn, who is an artist who has recently published and produced her own book based on her paintings. So we'll be hearing about that. So welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to want to hear about the book and how it all came about. So I think you told me that when your granddaughter was born, Matilda,
Yes.
and she was living in London at the time, right?
And still does.
And still does.
In England.
That you wanted to find a way to kind of bring her home to Brookline with you.
That's right.
Yeah.
When my son, who grew up in Brookline, and his wife they used to visit every year with the baby. And when they came, and she was 3.5, she was painting in my studio. And we have an old music box that my children played with, where you wind it up and a little clown dances in the box. And she loved it. And so she was playing with the box and drawing. And after they left, I missed her so much. And I'm sure everyone who has grandchildren understands that pull when you miss them. And I decided if I painted her, I could bring her back to me. And I would have her with me. And so I started.
So that was your fantasy.
That was my fantasy. So I decided I wanted to make a series of paintings. And it was about childhood imagination. And I had her painting with the music box, and then have him come out of the box and interact with her as a child of 3 might fantasize about that.
So this is the first time you've really done a children's book, right?
The very first time. And as a young woman, I was trained as an artist, as a painter in New York at the Art Students League, where I worked for years with Harry Sternberg and Arnold Blanche. And then I went to Pratt Institute in New York. They had a Pratt Center for Contemporary Printmaking. This is all in the early 60s. And I worked there for 5 years, learning lithography, and then eventually I was a lithoprinter, and then moved to Boston.
We have 1 or 2 pictures, I think, that we can put up on the screen of your
early
days
lithographs.
doing lithographs. Huh?
Yeah. And so eventually we moved there. That's an early lithograph. My work was much more surreal at that time than a children's subject. Yeah, yeah. We moved to Boston, to Cambridge, and then Brookline. And during the years when my children were, in the middle years, I became a single parent, and I just devoted all my time to them. And then when they...
So are you saying that during those years you really were not producing much artwork?
Not... I certainly, more or less, I wasn't really painting. I started working at the museum school, trying to make lithographs there, and found the shop there rather limited. So then I went to Impressions, where I had a professional printer that I worked with for about 10 years, and made a series of lithographs with him. And in fact, that lithograph you had up there, which is called When Things of the Spirit Come First, was printed by Paul McGuire. That was a 2-color lithograph.
Well, I'm curious about it because I think I might have told you that I just recently took a class on monoprinting.
Yeah, that's very different.
Right.
Because that's just one print, one take.
Yeah, yeah.
But lithoprinting historically is edition printing, where all the prints
I didn't realize they have to be identical.
Yes, and it's very different from even etching and aquatinting, because you could do one print, put the plate away, and 5 years later you could do another print. But with lithography, it has to all be printed at once because it's on a stone, a 300-400 pound stone that you print it, the edition is done, and then the stone is ground down for the next edition to be printed by someone else.
Oh. So just to come back to your book for a moment,
yes.
What was it like for you to publish a book.
Well,
That
it was
was
a lot of
a
fun.
new adventure for you, huh?
Yes, it was a lot of fun because, you know, I had spent time, when my kids went off to college, I went back to school and I got a degree. I got my undergraduate degree in classics, and then I went on and did a master's in art history. And I did a lot of studying of books. And so that was also on my mind, of the Renaissance images of early printing. So it was sort of fun.
So what about the story? What was it like for you to
write the story?
To write a children's story? Because that's not something that you've done before, right?
That's right. But I've read a lot of children's books because I raised my own 2 sons. And as a child, my father used to bring me beautiful books when I lived in New York, and we used to read beautiful books, beautifully illustrated books.
Do you expect you're going to do another children's book?
Well, I would like to. In fact, I was thinking of maybe doing another, some kind of new story for my little Julian, he loves playing with trains.
So he's the son of your
He's the
other
son of
son.
my, he's the little son of my son Jason. And I'm also interested now in painting because I'm beginning to think about painting portraits of people. I've gotten interested in that. And
that's not something that you did in the past?
no, I never really did very much of that. And it's something I sort of like to do while I still can. You know, while I still have the dexterity in my hands.
So what would you say has been the subjects that you have painted in the past?
Well, as a young person, my teacher, Harry Sternberg, very much was a message teacher, and this was at the Art Students League. And he would say to us, not what you are painting, but why you are painting. What is it that you want to say? What are you trying to convey?
Okay.
And he would send us all over New York, the city, go on the subways, go in the parks, go everywhere, and draw everything in sketchbooks. Draw everything you see, because what are you interested in? What is it you are trying to say about the world? And that was how I was trained to behave, to behave as an artist. So I became very involved with saying, as a young person, saying not only about, I loved painting mothers and children, and the children and mothers weren't always the happiest mothers and children, because I was also very message. I was trying to show the downside of motherhood as well as the upside.
Oh, okay, but those were not really portraits of particular people.
No.
It
They
was
were more
the
from
message.
imagination. It was more message of trying to show the human condition. I discovered academics in my 50s when I went back to school and went to Harvard.
Right.
Whereas in my teens and early 20s, I just
You weren't interested in
I went
that,
to
really?
I went to the new school at night and took a few courses, but I couldn't handle all the academic work, the math and science and language that was required of you in college. However,
But once you went back to school in your 50s,
I had to do it.
different?
I had to do language. I had to do math, statistics.
Did you find it was more comprehensible for you to do it when you were older?
I think it was. I was more ready to sit down and concentrate and really do it. And I when I did all my liberal arts courses in literature and classics and history, I found I could get A's. I was very excited to see that I had what it took, to do well. I graduated with honors.
Okay, so before we wrap up in a minute, I just want to make sure that people know how they might get your book.
Oh, yes.
So,
Well, first of all, the people who printed it and published it for me, it's called Blurb, BLURB.com. So you can always go to them and buy the book. Or you can go to Amazon.com, and then I have a shop on Etsy, ETSY.com, with my paintings and the book and drawings. And then locally, the Children's Bookstore has it, and the Harvard Bookstore has it, and also the Brookline Booksmith.